As you mentioned before, you joined the crew STK. Would you know the history of STK? Who started it? How it began?
I mean, I don't know all the history of it, but I'm sure Muriel was the one who started STK. I know Joe Joe was Muriel's right-hand man pretty much. So, but I'm not really knowledgeable about how the whole crew started and everyone in it at the beginning. But I know it was a small thing, but it grew to something pretty cool.
Once you join STK, does your goal in graffiti change, or what becomes your goal once you're in this well-known crew?
I think once I joined that crew, that was the first time that I felt like, okay, I'm now surrounded by people who are in, doing this. Like there's people in here who are bombing, there's people who are piecing. Then there's friends. Like I said, like I met Angst the first night, and Angst is legendary. Like his A throw ups were, dope. So I get to meet writers like that because of this affiliation. So it was dope. It was dope to see that. The downside is now you're in a crew, and now their beef is your beef. So there was some beef with some other crews in the area or whatever, and whatever. Luckily, nothing ever happened because of that. But that's one of the things that being in a crew, it comes with the territories. Like, people have egos and stuff like that, and especially back then. I remember back then, like, you couldn't have a name that sounded like yours. Like I remember, like I told you, there was this kid named Kane from STK, and him and Shock were bombing a lot at that time when I got in the crew, and we went to the very first graph convention. I think Frame did it, and we were there, and I remember Kane had his hat and it said Kane on it, and we ran into this kid named Vane from the West Side, Vane, and I remember Kane hit him up like, "Yo, all right, Kane." And the kid's like, all right, Vane. He's like, "Nah, fuck that. You can't write that," And it was so crazy because back then it was like, even if it sounded similar, it was beef, which sounds ridiculous now because now there's people like straight up stealing full people's names and using it, and it's not a big deal. But yeah, back then everyone was really like ego tripping on all their stuff and trying to keep everything tight. So it was a different time, and it was fun or whatever. But sometimes you get into beefs because of stuff like that,
Once you join STK and you're surrounded by all these artists, do you feel your own artwork goes to another level with their help?
Yeah, definitely. I was inspired by everything Muriel was doing. Like, I would just sit in his house and look at his sketchbooks, and I was like, man, like this is dope. And like I learned how to draw with ballpoint, ballpoint pens. Like the big pens, like I didn't do that before until I saw Muriel doing it. I learned how to draw like letter forms and how he did his letters and arrows and just basic things like that. So I was definitely inspired, but it was like, okay, how am I going to go from doing this to the next level, So for me, it was just about piecing, So whenever I could, I remember one time me and Muriel by ourselves, we went to paint at Belmont, and at the time, I guess STK had beef with BSK at the time, and I remember we went down, and there was all these fools like painting a big wall back on the back side of Belmont, and we didn't know who they were. They were just painting, and me and him pulled up, and we just came down to the very first tiny wall on the left when you walk in. So we went down there and we did a ST Kill piece. And me and him did it like in maybe like I don't know, like an hour. We just busted like a quick piece, and then we took off. I don't even remember if we got a flick or not. Anyways, those dudes were all from BSK, and we didn't know that. And we came back maybe the next day or whatever, and the whole piece was dissed. The BSK had gone over the whole piece and dissed it and everything. And we were like, damn, we're lucky that they didn't find out who we were, because they would have kicked our ass. Just me and Muriel by ourselves. But that was part of the adventure back then. It was just like you didn't know who you were into. You were putting everything at risk just to get up and just to learn how to paint. I was chilling with him and painting with him because I wanted to see how to do fills, how to do fades, how to do blends, how to keep the, you know, the can control on the outlines. I learned a lot from that. Like I said, it was only like about a year that I hung out in that crew, but I learned a lot from him in that year, you know.